name is Rabbi Finn. Welcome back to my kitchen for another Bereishit bite. Each week we are making a different recipe related to that week's Torah portion. This week is Parshat Lecha. We finally get to meet our great, you get the idea, grandparents, Abraham and Sarah. We have the beginning of ethical monotheism, the beginning of Judaism, the beginning of a belief in one God who is kind, who is just, who rules the world. This week's portion starts off with that great call to Abraham. Lech Lecha me'artzacha mimolatcha mibeit avicha. Go for yourself on a journey. Leave your land, leave your birthplace, leave your father's house, leave all those spheres of influence and break free and go on your journey. And so we know that God guides Abraham on a journey to the land of Canaan, which would later be known as the land of Israel. But as soon as he gets there, pretty much there is a famine in the land, so he has to go to Egypt. In Egypt, he becomes extraordinarily wealthy, along with his nephew Lot. They get back to the land of Israel, and there is a fight between Lot's shepherds and Abraham's shepherds, and Abraham says, let us not fight, you go one way, I will go the other. There is a bit of a fight between 4 kings and 5 kings, and then finally the Torah portion ends with the Brit Milah, the circumcision of Abraham and also his son with Hagar, Ishmael, setting the scene for next week's portion. I want to share with you a short idea before I tell you all about this week's recipe. The short idea goes as follows. What is so special about Abraham? Why Abraham? Of all the people in the entire world, why does God speak to Abraham? Why does God choose Abraham? Now, if you look in the Midrash, the rabbinic teachings, there are lots of stories about Abraham growing up, which seems to place him as the perfect candidate to take forward this new ethical monotheism, this new project of bringing God into the world. But there is a different approach from the Sfat Emet, which is a beautiful idea, which says that God didn't choose Abraham, but Abraham chose God. According to the Sfat Emet, this phrase, Lech Lecha me'artzacha mimolatcha, go on your journey, was a phrase being uttered by God to all of humanity. But only one person picked up the baton, only one person answered the call. That was Abraham. So Abraham was chosen by God by virtue of choosing God. The Sfat Emet continues though, that call to humanity didn't just stop with Abraham and his generation, but it's actually continuing to this very day. Every day God is calling us, Lech Lecha, go on a journey, go on a spiritual journey, a journey Lecha, for yourself. Sometimes we obsess about other people's journeys, we comment on what other people are doing, but actually in Judaism we're supposed to focus on ourselves. We're supposed to focus on how are we fulfilling what God wants from us? How are we being the best person we can be? And so that is the message I want you to take this week. Lech Lecha is not just a phrase given to Abraham, but it's a phrase given to each and every one of us. And with that phrase comes a responsibility to make the world a better place, but also to live our journey, our Jewish journey. Now, to celebrate this week's portion, we are going to be making bread and butter pudding, but as it is Parav, I'm calling it bread without butter pudding. And you might be asking, why on earth am I making a bread and butter pudding? What on earth has that got to do with this week's portion? Well, let me tell you as follows. In a small bit which most people often gloss over, there is actually a battle between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. And to cut a long story short, Lot is taken capture. Abraham goes and rescues Lot and also rescues the 5 kings that have been held capture. And at the end of the battle, we are told that Melchizedek Melech Shalem, Melchizedek the king of Shalem, who is the first high priest of God, he brings out Lechem v'yayin, bread and wine. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'd gone to battle and I've rescued everybody, I would want a little bit more. I'll take the wine, but I'd want a little bit more than a bit of bread. So I would rather have a bread and butter pudding. You get the link? Brilliant. So, to celebrate that thing, or more to draw attention to a bit of a Torah which most people seem to gloss over, we are going to be making a bread without butter pudding. So please get your ingredients, join along with me, and as ever, post your comments and your pictures below. So we are making a bread and butter pudding to celebrate Parshat Lech Lecha. This is the perfect dessert for the time of year. As the days get colder, as the nights get longer, you want something warming, you want something comforting, and this dessert hits it on every single level. But I have a confession to make, because we are going to be making a Parav bread and butter pudding, which means no dairy whatsoever, no milk, no cream, no butter. So really this is a bread without butter pudding. The other conversion to make is we're going to be using a hack. We're going to be using Alpro vanilla custard. Now, before you judge me and say, why aren't you making your own custard? Trust me, make this and then you won't judge me, because it's going to be the most beautiful dessert you have made in a long time. So let's make a bread and butter pudding to celebrate Parshat Lech Lecha. To begin, you are going to want to use 1 whole tub of vanilla Alpro custard. You want to pour it into a bowl, and it takes a bit of time to get it out. You need to give it a bit of a shake. Makes a bit of a weird noise. You want to make sure you get all of it out. For those of you who are interested, there's 525 grams of custard going into this. Once you've got it all out, or got enough out that you're happy, you would like to have about half a cup of soya milk. If you don't have any soya milk, use almond milk. If you don't have almond milk, use oat milk. If you don't have any of those, use some water. But about half a cup of soya milk. This just helps loosen the custard. I want to make sure I've got all of it out. So get the final bits. Into the bowl with your custard and your soya milk, you want to add 2 eggs. You want to add about a teaspoon of vanilla. Finally, because I want to add a little bit more sweetness, you're going to add about a tablespoon of sugar and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Once you've got all of those ingredients into a bowl, give it a bit of a mix just to break up the eggs, to loosen up the custard, and to get the sugar and the cinnamon and the vanilla mixed in. This is the base, and it should be of some sort of pourable consistency. If you think it's a bit too thick, add in a little bit more soya milk. You want it to be the consistency of a pancake batter. I must say, it smells amazing. I'm currently getting the cinnamon and the sugar and the vanilla. Once you've given it a mix and you're happy, let's move on to the other ingredients. So, you are going to want to have a whole loaf of bread. If you've got challah, some spare challah around, use that. Trust me, it'll be amazing. If you've got some brioche around, use that, it'll be even better. But you can do it with just a plain loaf of white bread, and that is what I'm doing. I personally don't like the crust in this, so I'm going to get rid of the crust, but if you particularly like the crust, enjoy. Getting rid of the crust, and once I've got rid of the crust, I'm going to cut the bread into squares. And it doesn't really matter how neat the squares are going to be, because the bread is going to really be mushed up and is going to lose a lot of its form. So cut it into squares, and as soon as you cut it into squares, throw it into your bowl of the custard. So I'm using a loaf of bread, which is roughly the equivalent of about 800 grams of white bread. I would probably for this recipe be using a medium challah if I was using challah instead. Challah will be sweeter and will be more unctuous, but as I say, the white bread is good enough. Now, it doesn't matter actually if your bread is slightly stale. In fact, it probably works better with slightly stale bread. Once you've put the bread into the custard mix, give it a bit of a mix just so that it can start to soak up the custard. And then leave it to one side. Get rid of the scraps of bread, deal with them later. We're going to add in a few more ingredients. There's 2 ways you can make this bread and butter pudding. One way is to use chocolate chips. If you're going to use chocolate chips, it's going to be a really nice kid-friendly dessert. The chocolate chips get all melted inside, and I would use about a cup of chocolate chips. In fact, you know what? Use a cup and a half of chocolate chips, and it is really, really a beautiful dessert. However, today I've decided to go traditional, so I'm going to use 1 cooking apple and a cup of raisins, a cup of sultanas. So the cooking apple, I've peeled it already, and I'm just going to very thinly slice the apple. Slice all of the apple in, and once it's ready, put it into the bowl. It's as simple as that. If you don't like apple, don't put the apple in. If you don't like the sultanas, well, go for the chocolate chip version instead. So, apples in there. Now I'm going to add a cup of raisins. Just roughly, I find about a quarter of a bag of raisins. So it's 100 grams, 150 grams of raisins. And give the whole thing a really, really good mix. It doesn't matter if you find yourself mashing the bread, because to be honest, you want it to break up. You want the bread to become quite wet with the custard. So you need to give it a really, really, really good mix. You're going to want everything covered in your custard, eggy, soya mix, the apples, the raisins, the bread. And once you've mixed it, you want to leave it for about half an hour to soak up all of the juices. During that time, the bread is going to become very, very soggy indeed, but do not worry. This will help it puff up and cook into the most amazing bread without butter pudding. So to recap, that's it. That's how easy it is. In there was a tub of a tub of Alpro custard, half a cup to a cup of soya milk, 2 eggs, splash of sugar, a splash of vanilla, a splash of cinnamon, 1 cooking apple, 800 grams of shredded bread, and a cup of raisins. And once you've mixed it up and mashed it down a bit, leave it to rest for half an hour. Let me just show you what it looks like at the moment. And I will see you in half an hour's time. Okay, so it's been half an hour. My dish is ready to go into the oven. So all you need to do is pour it into a prepared tin. I'm using a 9x9 silver foil tin. Just pour it all in, give it a mix. It's not going to look glamorous. But once you've put it in, just push it around so it fills up the entire tin. And then finally, get a good sprinkle of Demerara sugar over the top. A really good sprinkle. And this is what it will look like. So, in here you've got the bread, you've got the custard, you've got the raisins, the apple, the cinnamon, the vanilla. I'm now going to bake this in an oven at 180 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes to 40 minutes. You want it to puff up and look really, really nice. If it takes a bit longer, it takes a bit longer. If you think it's done in less, I highly doubt it, but give it a try anyway. So 180 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes in the oven. I will see you once this is ready. So here it is, my bread without butter pudding, the perfect dessert for this week's Parsha, as we remember how after Avram had won the war, Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, brought out some bread. To be honest, I would much prefer a bowl of this, served warm with a good dollop of ice cream or some custard. The perfect dessert for this week. So I want you to give it a go and let me know how you get on. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.